Okay, so we're now recording. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Women in Ag Wednesday webinars. Today is October 25th. We'll be talking about selling your farm eggs to retail outlets. Would like to thank our sponsors as well as the collaborators. We have some upcoming webinars, crop insurance programs and Annie's Project, and we'd also like to announce our annual conference for 2018. It'll be February 8th and 9th at Dover Downs. And more information about that conference, as well as this webinar recording and past webinar recordings, is available there in that link in blue, extension.umd.edu/womeninag. So with that, I am going to move the presentation to Ginger Myers. She is our presenter for today. We thank her for participating in this webinar. Ginger?
Thank you, Shannon, and welcome to everyone that's taking some time to join us in the Wednesday webinar where we're going to discuss about direct marketing shell eggs to various retailers. For those who may not know who I am, I'm the marketing specialist for Ag and Natural Resources with the University of Maryland Extension. I'm the director of the Maryland Rural Enterprise Development, which is an online business development site for the university. I do work with a number of ag entrepreneurs, direct marketers, developing specialty products, work with value-added foods, and mostly small business development. My husband and I also operate a grass-based livestock farm. We do have layers, so I've kind of been through some of this myself and learned from experience. There is a demand for local eggs. It's one of the things when you go to farmers markets people are looking for. We find that in retail outlets, particularly small stores or specialty shops, local eggs sell very well. So there is potential there, but I would put the caveat on that before you take this step, you really run your numbers, because as small producers, labor is going to be a big factor here. There are very few small-scale egg washers and graders, so much of this is going to be done by hand. So when you start looking at the profit potential, you have to look at the labor involved, and perhaps the best scenario is when you can get your foot in with a retailer through your eggs, but then sell other items that you have from your farm, so you can kind of help load your cart that way and introduce them to other products that you might have. This presentation is to give you an overview of some of the requirements for sales, particularly in Maryland. But as we all know, regulations keep changing sometimes. So when you contact the Maryland Department of Ag or you look at something online about requirements, check the date that it was published. There may be an update. By and large, the Maryland egg laws have been well established, but there are some changes, perhaps in packaging or perhaps how we're grading it, some of these things. One of the first steps that you'll need to consider if you're going to sell shell eggs, whether that's from your farm stand or through the grocery stores, is that you are required to register your flock. You'll see the link there. You can very easily Google the Maryland Department of Agriculture egg laws. This is really not an onerous task at all. You'll get a form they'll ask you to fill out. There is no charge or no fee if you're less than 3,000 layers. So size does matter. If you're considering going at this, in a big way, you will have a fee to register. Otherwise, there's no fee. And from this form, you will be given a flock number that will stay with your operation through the duration of when you sell eggs. Again, this isn't looking to track you for some or look for some problem, but if there was an outbreak of a disease, and we've certainly been cautioned about avian influenza and some of these problems, the department needs to know where these birds are so that either through isolation or updates or warnings that something's happened, they really do use this more as a location tool rather than any kind of monitoring. So your first step will be to get that form. It's online at the Maryland Department of Agriculture. and it's very simple to fill out. You will be required to fill it out annually. They do update these listings, so you want to get that done. Okay. Again, when size matters, of course, there's grades and sizes. Grade AA and A are the only grades permitted in Maryland, and these are designated. They can't be cracked or dirty or adulterated in any way. It's also going to be on your cartons that's the grade, and it is by size. Again, the equipment you use probably will be the same thing your grandmother used. There is an egg scale. You can buy them online from poultry box suppliers or at farm stores. It is a scale that's graded by weight, and it's, as you'll see there, it says per egg average. It's not right on the, it's more the weight, the total weight of the carton by a dozen. It could vary a little bit. One egg's going to be maybe a half an ounce bigger than another, but it's the weight by carton. And you'll need to know what that size is and similar sizes to a box. That may sound pretty elementary, but realize that other states can sell what they call ungraded mixed size or nest run. I talked to folks who are familiar with farmers markets in Virginia, where the eggs can be sold out of a basket, and you can mix your sizes and whatever grade you want for so much. And you know, that might save labor on that farm, but in Maryland, that's not a permitted way to sell. So we do need to weigh eggs, grade them, and box them by similar size. Carton case labeling for shell eggs. The next 4 slides deal with this labeling issue. So just to give you a hint of how detailed it is, and we kind of take it for granted, I don't want to go through all the minutia of the 4 slides. I do want to have some highlights there because I actually do have a picture of a box, and we're pretty all familiar with what that box looks like, but this is to highlight that there are some requirements on these egg cartons and cases. The first, of course, is that there needs to be a safe handling statement, and it needs to be, you know, very well designated. The packer distributor's name, this is usually right on what we call the principal panel, or you would think of it as the top of the box. Also a number, a registration number. Now, I'm using the term packer here, and often packers are more than 3,000 birds, but it's you know, anybody who's putting these eggs together. Now, when you talk with Deanna Baldwin, in Maryland, it's made it a little easier that you can put together a label or a stamp that will have your farm name, town, and flock number. That's when they talk about a registration number. For most of us, that will be a flock number that's going to go on the top of the box label. Again, in Maryland, they've been helpful that we can use a similar lot number. You don't have to keep track of all of them, but you do need to have a lot number on there. Believe it or not, you've got to identify the product as eggs. Seems redundant, but realize that the consumers have all kinds of packaging styles. So labeled as eggs, the amount, you know, 12 eggs, 6 eggs, whatever, and the word grade must be on there. Again, a little bit about dating. This gets somewhat confusing, and you have to wonder why are there these different terms. It depends a little bit on who you're selling to and through. That is, if you're selling at a farmer's market versus perhaps a small grocery store that may have a different criteria for this. There are basically several designations as to freshness date. The freshness date can't exceed 30 days, and the question is, are you really putting that on there? It's a term often used by, again, the larger packers, those who may perhaps use a USDA shield. That's a whole different requirement. It's for those folks who are looking at maybe 10,000 dozen a week that that are going to use that shield and look at a freshness date. We're more concerned with how are you going to date egg cartons. There's several code dates out there. You know, an expiration date, a sell-by date, or a best if used before. And again, oftentimes at farmers markets, we're going to talk about, you know, best if used before. A retail store may want to have a sell-by. Larger commodity buyers use an expiration date. It's an insurance thing for them to have that. I don't know many smaller marketers that use an expiration date because it's such a red flag. But some of these are carryovers from years of developing the shell egg market. So if an expiration date is used, it can't be more than 30 days from the days that the eggs were packed in a carton. More often than that, we're going to see used by or best before, and that cannot exceed 45 days. Now, you're going to ask, well, who knows? Who knows my date? Well, you know your date. And again, remember, eggs are a perishable product. One of the great attributes of selling farm eggs is that they are often fresher. The quality and flavor of these is what's going to be your calling card. So knowing how to date them and sticking with that date and educating your buyers, whether they be at the farmer's market or whether they be at a college, as to, you know, the date and the use of this. Oftentimes we find that folks want to know, how long can I keep these in the fridge? And when you can tell them that you know, you've still got, you know, 44 days on these eggs, it often helps with sales. This is back to that sample egg carton for those 4 slides on labeling. This is the visual where on the top or the box, there's going to be that farm name, your name, a dozen, so it's the quantity, grade A, large brown. Perhaps you just want to have large eggs, and of course the farm name. This can be, you can find various layouts for this, but oftentimes this will be on the top. We're looking at that front panel on the third figure down is where you're going to find often the safety and the storage and chill recommendations for these eggs. Now on this particular one, you can see there's a barcode. You may or may not need that depending on where you're selling. I don't see very many small producers that have cartons with that on. And then of course the last at the bottom there, and I realize this is a small slide, that's where they're going to have this best used by or sell by date on here. That being said, you know, we're going to talk about, well, okay, all this stuff, where do I find a carton like this? Well, there's online, there's a number of outlets, Egg Carton, the Egg Carton Store, eggcartonsonline.com. There are several packing area services like Uline that makes a pretty standard carton that will have all this information already on it in the right place. You'll need to put your farm name and flock number information on there on the top panel somewhere, and then your best used by or expiration date, whichever you're using, on that corner. There's some you know, cost to cartons depending on the volume you buy. Very seldom do I see much difference in the size, except till you get to jumbos. Those cartons are always certainly a little more expensive, but you can look at cartons that are colorful. You can look at the clear plastic, a little bit of what you're branding as to what kind of cartons you want to purchase. Some folks start out by reusing cartons, but I actually find that often reusing cartons just makes for a poor presentation of your eggs, because so often you have to ink out what doesn't apply to you. If that carton was somebody else's that was a different size, if it had a USDA shield on it or some kind of specialty listing like organic, that all has to be inked out. And certainly there can be no, they can't be dirty. If you open a carton, you know, somebody else's egg leak, you can't use those. It's just, I know it's an added cost to purchase these eggs, but we're talking about not handing them off to Cousin Clem now. We're talking about selling them to somebody who's taking them home in their refrigerator and your name's on it. And for food safety, it needs to be a clean carton. I do get folks giving me back cartons because they're trying to help with recycling. And I take them because I understand what they're trying to do. And if it's my box and it is clean and the right size, I might take a look at using that. But the problem is, of course, if you've dated it on the side with any kind of use by date, then that has to get inked out and a new date put on. And again, question who you're selling to that would want a box that's adulterated. So it's worth ponying up the money to buy nice, presentable boxes. Excuse me. There is a Maryland Best logo that you can, if you want to use, you have to apply for. And again, it's an additional print job. It's hard to do it just on a sticker to put on your boxes. So you may want to look at whether that's really a sales tool for you, and it may be, particularly if you're going to a local chain grocery store and want to set your eggs out apart somehow from the other eggs that they're bringing in. But there is an application for that and a participation that requirement as far as how you're tracking it and how you're using it. Again, there's the website here. All of this information is on the Maryland Department of Agriculture's site. You can go to USDA, but Maryland's done a really nice job, Deanna Baldwin and her crew, of putting all the egg quality assurance requirements and supporting documentation on that website to help you along. Okay, so now we've got them in a box, and there is some refrigeration requirements for transport. Those who go to farmers and markets know that this is often, you know, if somebody comes to your market and is taking temperatures, they may open your coolers and what is the temperature of your eggs? They are not to exceed 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So that is for food safety. And so how do we do that? You can do it either with mechanical refrigeration somehow, or you can put cooler packs or freezer packs in your coolers, but you will not want your cartons to have any kind of contact. Again, these are often pulp cartons or even plastic cartons. You don't want to get them wet. You just need to be able to control the 45 degree temperature in there. So if you're doing deliveries around town or to your purchaser, remember that you do want to check this temperature control. Now, there are really good coolers out there now. You know, the marine coolers that really will hold well. A couple of years ago, I would have said, you know, you're going to look at some kind of mechanical cooling, and for folks who were doing, you know, maybe just a couple hundred dozen a week, the purchase was pretty prohibitive. But with the better quality coolers that we have now, I think you can look at doing that without, you know, buying a special refrigeration unit to do it. Though if you're going to get large, if you're going to be delivering lots of eggs several times a week, you may want to start looking for some of those kinds of refrigeration units that not freeze but will chill, you know, down to about 40 to hold an ambient temperature for these eggs. So now we've got the eggs in a box. We know how we're going to transport them and the chill rate. So what about purchasers? Who's going to buy all these eggs? And we talk about getting into retail sales. And we're talking about perhaps small grocery stores, other specialty stores that are featuring local products. You may want to think about perhaps a college food service. You might not be able to supply all the eggs they have or use, but perhaps they'll purchase some from you and balance out with their other commercial eggs. So you need to sit down and think about who your potential buyers are. Now, I would caution if you go to a store and there's already two other local producers there, the question of whether you can do me too, whether there's going to be room there. But visit around, particularly places where convenience people pick up, when eggs, bread, and milk. Could you be in a case there? Do they have enough volume? So give that some thought before you go any further, and prepare. What would you say to a buyer? What's your wholesale cost per dozen? And you may need to look at that as 2 sizes, or maybe you're just going to always feature large or extra large. They're going to want some standard there. I mean, they don't want you to bring them, some medium, some large, some extra large. You're probably, in this case, going to be selling basically 1 or 2 sizes. Do you have a price list? And if you have other products, they can all be listed there. So how much can you deliver each week? Try to get a realistic number on that. Again, I know when we start changing flock sizes, we start out with them laying pretty slow. Kind of figure out peak production. If you're doing farmers markets, can you carry some extras? If once the farmers market's closed down, what are you going to do with all those eggs? When can you start? When are you going to do this? And how they're going to want to see, what does your box look like? How's it labeled? How's it presented? You may want to scope out all these places and take a look beforehand. And then, of course, they're going to ask, do you have liability insurance? It's almost assumed, but you may, particularly with food services, have to give a copy of your food liability insurance. So you want to make sure that that's in line. Now, back to that, how are your eggs packaged or labeled? We've been talking about dozen carton eggs, but we've also got to consider when you're going to someplace that a bakery or a commercial kitchen that's baking, they're not going to take those in dozen cartons. They're going to be looking at the boxes that are 15 or 30 dozen to a box. That's our own flats, because they're going to pull these eggs out by the flat and be able to use them very quickly and rapidly. When you're looking to make that contact, you're not going to make a cold call. You might chat with somebody at the checkout a little bit about, oh, I see you have eggs, do they sell well? But you really do need to contact the person or find who's in charge of the purchases, and then contact them for an appointment. You might need to find a phone number or an email. And now remember, these folks have lots of emails, so give it a day or two if they don't get back to you, and follow up. But contact in advance. Back to food services, when I talked about those who are often operating, maybe that's a college, maybe it's I wouldn't say a hospital, but it's a little harder to get in some of those, but a food service facility, and some of this is even restaurants where there's a contract for certain things. And again, you may need to speak to who's in charge of the purchasing to see if they have room to take on your eggs as well. It will be critical for you to know how much you can supply on a weekly basis to them, because they will need to make up a shortfall with their larger supplier if they're willing to work you in, but they do need some regularity. The other side of that is that if you're working with a college, when college closes for the holidays, they don't need your eggs. So how are you going to handle that, and what's the plan and policy? Where are you going to go with your extras if you're going to work with food services? I apologize for the small type, but wanted to get on to this fairly quickly and get it all in one slide for you. When you're doing the appointment, go prepared. These are busy people. You're a busy person, but it's also a indication of your professionalism when you go there with your brochure, your price list, your business card. Have that organized in an envelope or a little folder. They don't have a lot of room on their desk to throw things, but not with a paperclip. They want to see this in one place. They want to know all that information. How do I order from you? Who do I contact? Do you have any point of sales material? I have a couple sales places where they'll let me put my farm brochure out. They like that. Other places do not. They want to do their own point of sale information, touting that they have local eggs. Some cartons that you can buy even put on local hens as a logo to help kind of with that point of sale just on your carton alone. But go prepared and take 2 sets of your product samples. You may want to take a box of your large versus your extra large, or even photos of your product so that they know exactly what they're getting. And check these samples really close. They should be your prime. This is your chance to show them what you have. The other thing, of course, when you were working on your customer list, hopefully you were doing this appointment homework where is it a good fit for you? Does it look like someplace where your product fits in? Is it a similar philosophy? Visit their website, learn their story so that when you sit down to talk with them, you have the right tools and the right information to marry your product to their product line and their philosophy. And if they've given you an appointment and you've gotten that far but still not interested in your product, ask them why. Perhaps it wasn't that you didn't have the volume and you didn't realize that, or perhaps they don't have room right now, but perhaps later. Sometimes small stores, small outlets will have 2 or 3 suppliers and they're already booked, but a supplier may leave and they want your information as a backup. So if they're not willing to make it, or if they may just say that they have to go up the chain and check things out, and that's understandable. Give them a little time and then just don't pester them, but do a nice follow-up with them. So if you do get the sale, there are requirements for the invoices of things that have to be on your invoice. And the invoices are part of the egg quality assurance inspection. When the health department egg inspectors come in to look at a store or a campus or a food facility, they certainly look at the products, but they also pull the files to make sure that the invoices reflect the information about those eggs that are needed. Okay, again, you can, back to the MDA, they have a great little example of this online, but you do need to have this information. They want to know, of course, who bought it and who the seller was, the date of the delivery, and you'll have to write out, perhaps it says 15 dozen grade A extra large brown eggs. They want all the information, and they'll also want you to put on there what the expiration date or the best sell-by date is. The date time on eggs is very important, and they're going to want to see that the dates match up with either what's still in the case or perhaps what was sold before, or the time frame. So once you get this kind of hammered out, you can keep this information pretty much on an invoice on a regular delivery and changing that expiration date or that best use by date. But you specifically will need the number of dozen or number, and in a case of cases, it will be by the a 30 dozen, so forth will be a case, or perhaps a 15 dozen, but they're going to want to know the quantity, the grade, the size. All needs to be on your invoice. Liability insurance, anytime you're selling any kind of food product in particular off your farm, you are going to need to make sure you have liability insurance. This is not just for farm property. This is a food liability insurance that you're going to look at. For those who go to the farmers markets, you have some of this already, but you need to check that with your insurance or whoever's carrying it, that it covers the type of direct marketing you're going to get into that's different perhaps in a farmer's market, particularly if you're going to go through a wholesale distributor of some kind or a larger food service. Need to figure out whether your insurance covers the amount or type of direct marketing you're doing. Is there a limit? Talk about how much you need to be insured for. A lot of times food services will require $3 million per occurrence. And again, understand your policy, whether that coverage is for the claims made or encourages. So the claims made may be an amount, the occurrences may be a frequency. It's pretty straightforward with your insurance agent. And I would take care of this as part of your market research when you start thinking about, do I want to do this? You may have this already if you're selling eggs anywhere or a farm product, or you may be new to it to understand what this is going to cost. And again, back to doing that production budget before you get too far down the road to make sure that this is a profitable enterprise for the amount of labor you're going to put into it. So once you've had the sales, yay, it's always advisable to do some customer service afterwards. Particularly after the first delivery. Just, again, these are busy folks. They don't want to sit around a lot and talk with you, but they will appreciate an email or a quick call and just check out, was everything okay? You know, maybe as simple as, did we deliver things to the right place? Was the, the quantity correct? Was there anything with the service? Were we there the right time of day for you? Did we put the invoice in the right place? Were we supposed to have somebody else sign for it? All those little things that I hope you ironed out before that delivery, but just a little follow-up. By and large, they're going to be happy with what you've done, but they're also going to be happy that you cared enough to follow up. Remember that you're part of a solution for them by bringing them a product that will support them and sales for them, or item that they want in their menu. So they want you there, but they also want you to be part of their story and help them with their problems. Providing replacement for any problem product. I often find that it's not maybe a broken egg, but if you're in a commercial case and somebody tears the carton because they've handled it wrong, no one wants that carton that's got a tear in. Though the eggs are perfectly fine, you may be, do we need to keep a few extra cartons for you when I come to deliver? Do you want to put them, up on a shelf somewhere if you got a problem? Look for ways, again, to promote your eggs, whether that's point of sale or in-store promotions. With social media, it's real easy to take some pictures of your eggs in the case, promote the store. They love linkage and list them there and cross promotions to make people aware of where you're selling. And if you need to change the quantity, for instance, if a predator attacks your flocks and takes out half your laying hens and you're not going to have the product or the timely of the delivery, get to the buyer as soon as you can. Most often they're going to have some kind of backup. They're going to understand that something has happened, but don't get to the delivery day and say, oh, we just didn't have it. Give them as much notice as you can. The other side of that is I've had buyers say, we are closing for a holiday, for a couple of days off, realize that next week probably we're not going to need as many. So that does run both ways. So, the conundrum is you need to figure out, is this something you should do? Get on with it and grow this enterprise as part of your farm enterprise, and is it profitable? Sometimes the decision not to go forward is as good as the decision to go forward. but decide if this works for you. Once you get into the groove of this, you'll find it's very satisfying to the people. Just they'll ooh and on. They like your eggs, and again, it's an entry for, do you have other products that perhaps you do sell a meat product that would go well in the cases, or do you have seasonal vegetables that the chef would like to use when they're already buying your eggs? It's sort of an entry product to get you in the door. But definitely run your numbers to make sure that labor-wise and time-wise it's going to be profitable for you. With that, I think we're through all the slides. I don't know if anybody has a question or concern. Shannon, are you there? I don't know if we've got. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't unmute for some reason. Yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to put them there in the chat pod. I'm going to stop recording while we're working on that, if there's any questions. That was wonderful, Ginger.
Oh, thank you.